Hi all, this is Skate, and this is a tank which has been long overdue an appearance on this channel. This is the T110E4, the American turreted tank destroyer. And it's a very good tank. It's a very versatile tank. However, when you come up to this from the T30, it doesn't really play in the same fashion. I mean, with a T30, you are relying on that rock-hard turret, pop a ridge with your fantastic 10 degrees of gun depression, and you make the gun sing. This thing has 6 degrees of gun depression, and it has a massive weak spot on top, which has around 152mm of armor, which gives it an effective thickness of around 200mm. It does have a rock-hard gun mantlet, and I do mean rock-hard. The gun mantlet on this thing packs over 400mm of effective thickness, so you're not penetrating that. So it's the top weak spot and the cheeks. If you hit at the lower points of the turret on this thing, you're looking around 220mm of effective thickness. As you come out to the corners, though, you start to go up to around 300 to 340. In other words, it's a very hit and miss turret. And for that reason, it doesn't play as exact as a T30. So when you jump from a T30 to this, you kind of go, oh, hang on now. What happened? That shot's awful, by the way. It was so bad. I had plenty of places to shoot that tank, and I shot his gun. Great. Yeah, when you go up from the T30 to this just kind of feels a little bit disappointing. You've got to adjust your playstyle from the T30, and you've got to get used to this thing. But once you do get used to it, it is a very good, and as I've already said, very versatile tank. It's also a confused tank. It doesn't know whether it's a tank destroyer or it doesn't know whether it's a heavy tank, because it plays very much like a heavy tank. But aside from coming up from the T30, you tend to find this sinks into the background for a lot of people in comparison to other tier 10 tank destroyers. I mean, the Death Star, known for its crazy high alpha and semi-traversable turret. Yet because this thing doesn't pack a punch like the Death Star, well, it's not as popular. But I think this is a more well-rounded tank than something like a Death Star. And the reason I say that is from my personal experience. I've got in excess of 1,000 battles in the Death Star, and I'm now coming up 800 battles in this, I think. And in every aspect, if I compare the two tanks to myself, my statistics are better in this thing. My average damage is virtually the same in the two tanks, and most people would think the Death Star would have a much higher average damage than this. There's less than 60 average damage. Bearing in mind this is over like a fair few hundred battles in each tank. So as a result, it would have balanced out by now, and it has. There's barely anything between my average damage on the two tanks. Yet I have a higher win rate in this thing. I've got a higher survival rate, I got a higher average XP, I've got a much higher spot rate in this thing than I do in the Death Star. Now I know that is just one comparative, and it's only my comparative. But I wanted to give it because I kind of feel like this tank slips into the background for a lot of people when they look at tier 10 tank destroyers. But I also want to compare another tank to this one, the E100. And the reason I want to compare that tank is because I feel the playstyle on these two aren't too dissimilar. Yeah, the other one's a giant box and is very easy to side-scrape up against things and angle up against things. But this thing does have some good armor, yet it's riddled with weak spots. And it's got a similar gun. Except this thing has more DPM. It's got like 2,900 with a rammer, and 295mm of penetration, which is more than enough to contend with pretty much most tanks you come across. And if it's not, you've got APCR, which has 375mm of penetration. In other words, penetrating things in one of these isn't really a concern in any shape or form. Yeah, you'll get some bounces, but realistically, you'll get a damn sight more pens than you'll ever get bounces, even on an IS-7, which says a lot. Damn troll tank. That's a tank which is overdue a video on this channel as well. I need to get to that tank. So yeah, what I want to run through basically in the rest of this video is how I like to play the E4. And I mentioned the E100 because it's not too dissimilar as I mentioned, except for this is a lot more mobile. And it has a damn sight better gun. It has a more accurate gun, it has higher DPM. You're basically just sacrificing a bit of armor for that. But this thing plays like a heavy tank. And this thing has very nice HE as well, which means you can do things like this, which is not the first time we've all seen it, but it's damn fun. I don't care how many times I do it. If I can get 1,000+ roll on a medium tank, it makes me laugh. Especially if I'm in something which is not a Death Star. But yeah, I pretty much play this like a heavy tank. I don't sit at the back in this thing. You play surprisingly aggressive, and you can do it in this. I have mentioned that guy just shot a HE at me. I have no words. Yeah. I completely lost train of thought after that. I didn't even realise I got HE'd in the face then. Yeah, okay. This thing is riddled with weak spots. The trick to dealing with said weak spots is keep moving. It's got big weak spots on the cheeks, as I mentioned, but yet as the turret starts to go around, they're no longer weak spots, or they become very hit and miss whether you're going to pen them. You got a big weak spot on top, but if you're moving, well, it's a hard target. Well, at medium and long range, as soon as you get real close, it's not a hard target. The way I like to try and avoid, or try and reduce the chances of that big weak spot on top being hit, is by getting in real close. And I will demonstrate that exactly what I mean in the next game, because if you can see someone pointing up at your big old weak spot on top, or you can see them trying to point down at your hull, get in close, because as soon as you have a giant gun mantlet in your face, you can still hit the weak spot every now and then, but it makes it harder. And then of course, something which combines the turret and the hull, before I move on to the hull, you only have a semi-traversing turret. And by that I mean you can only turn the turret 180 degrees. 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, not a full 360. Which can be a bit annoying sometimes, especially if you have a medium tank coming in at close range. You need to prepare for that. And then the other thing to consider with that is you have really poor ammo rack coming up, by the way. It won't be the last one in this game either. Spoiler. Damn it, train of thought. Oh yeah, the other thing to consider is, in true American tank fashion, you have really poor rear armor. Big old engine deck on the back, 38mm. A measly, paltry, pathetic 38mm. So you can HE the hell out of that thing all day long, in anything. So if anyone gets onto the back of you, you're going to be addressed crazy quick. So you have got to deal with mediums before they get to the point of being behind you. Which is why you'll notice in this circumstance I'm alone against a T62A. I'm trying not to get too close to him without any form of cover next to me to squeeze him off. I'm less concerned about having hard cover all the time in this tank like I am with something like a turretless tank destroyer. I always repeat, keep hard cover near you. There's the second ammo rack. Wasn't anything glorious, but it's still 2 ammo racks in the same game. It happens, but for some reason, as of recent to me, it hasn't happened a lot recently. But yeah, the turrets and the combined traverse on the tracks means you can swing the gun around very quickly. Up to a certain point, of course. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention there about the armor was the hull. Now, if you were to believe the World of Tanks Blitz Garage, it says the E4 has 254mm of frontal hull armor, which instantly makes you go, yeah, this is going to be heavily armored if you've never been in one before, or you've never even come across, which is highly doubtful. It does not. The upper hull has 140mm, but it's sloped very aggressively far backwards, which with armor angles basically means you're looking 260mm of effective thickness or thereabouts minimum, going up to well over 300. The lower plate, on the other hand, only has 114mm of primary armor, which means effective thickness on the very front in the middle is only around 200, and then the sides go down to around 190. In other words, where it says 254mm in garage isn't really a clear description. The 254mm is on a strip of belt armor around where the upper plate meets the lower plate. That's the thickest point of the hull armor. That's actually a perfect time to mention the ammo rack. The ammo rack is behind that front lower plate. In fact, if you go through the drive wheels on this tank, you're going to annoy the hell out of whoever is driving it by perma-tracking it and damaging the ammo rack constantly. That's something important though, because there's two modules there, and this may seem like a glaringly obvious thing to say, but say for example, you get shot in your front drive wheel, you use your repair kit, someone pops out in a very fast rate of fire tank straight away, and shoots you again in the drive wheel, except this time damages your ammo rack in the process. You no longer have a repair kit because you've used one earlier on in the game. Yeah, that's it. You're now with a damaged ammo rack as well as a damaged stuck track. So if someone shoots your track, doesn't damage you, try not to repair instantaneously if you can see they're not going to poke straight back out, because it may make the difference between losing your ammo rack for a percentage of the game or not. Again, I know that may seem a glaringly obvious thing, but many players will also say it's slightly... It's very therapeutic when you're in a crazy rate of fire tank, especially an autoloader, and you damage someone's track, they use a repair kit straight away, and you manage to do it again, and they use the second one, and then you do it again. We all know how much fun that is to do. But you also know that sometimes you can repair it, and they won't come out with the second or third shell, which means you could have got away with not repairing it, really. So you really need to pay attention for those things. One thing I want to mention there, in terms of that T-54, we backed right up then, and there was no chance he could have got around the back of us just by reversing back as he was coming towards us. So that can be the difference between allowing a T-54 to be stuck on the rear end of your tank, pumping HE into you and setting you on fire, and not. As easy as that. I say that, but it's a bit of a contradiction from what I said earlier. I said earlier that if there's something close range to you, the easiest way to hide your weak spot is by putting a giant gun mantlet in their face. However, this is where one of those gotta work out the scenario situations come in. Because if I did that with the T-54 being out in the open the way I was, tried to close the gap, he would have been able to get behind me. If he couldn't get behind me, then yeah, it would have been an opportune way to reduce the chance of him penetrating me with another shot. However, in the circumstance, I would have much rather have one through the front of my tank and keep him in front of me rather than allow him to get around the back by trying to close the gap. Now, next thing I want to point out, side of that E50B. If I can find a side shot and use the HE, I will aim for the side shot as much as I can, because we've put one shot into that 50B and taken half the health off a heavy tank. And here he comes again, and we've got another HE shot on the go, and we take another 992. That's 2,000 damage plus in 2 shots to that guy. Now, I want to help that E5 as much as I can. However, he's got 2 one-shot targets on him. Now, I have a 268 on me, who did manage to penetrate me, and now I'm a one-shot against him, which is 3 shots. Here we go. Notice I'm trying my hardest to close this gap, because it makes all my weak spots much harder to hit. And as well as closing the gap, I am wiggling hell for leather. When he looks one way, I'm looking that way, to try and hide the weak spot. The one's next to the gun mantlet, because that's what he's aiming for. I dunk one on his roof, though, and I ricochet on his roof. But he's aiming for the cheek next to my gun mantlet, and you can see he's now trying to aim up. And in the circumstance I'm in a stronger position, because, well, he's struggling to find the shots because he has that huge gun mantlet right in his face. Now, obviously, it's not guaranteed, but the chances of hitting the weak spots in the difference between just stopping and being a few meters apart, hell of a difference. He's also frantically trying to look for the weak spots on us, but because of the way we're moving and trying to put the gun mantlet wherever he's pointing his gun, really does help. End result, had a fun game, but also 6,678 damage, 1,536 XP, and we had 3 kills. That's it for this video for now, though. This is basically the basics on how I like to play the T110E4. I intend on doing another one, and that one I'm going to attempt to go into a bit more detail in how I try to position the tank, and and so on and so forth in a bit more detail. Positioning is a bit of a complex one if you think about it, though, because it's very situational. You can't always position yourself in the same place because the battle moves. But yeah, that'll be in the next T110E4 video, which hopefully won't be too long, because, well, the tournaments are now finished, which means I can spend the excess time actually doing different live streams and getting some more videos out. But I hope you have enjoyed this T110E4 video. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye.